Shadows of the Peacock Throne, the secret protocol. The air in the subterranean Situation Room was thick with the scent of ozone and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the crisp, cherry blossom spring of Washington, D.C. outside. On the high-definition monitors, a grainy satellite feed showed a motorcade winding through the dusty outskirts of Tehran. At the head of the table, the President of the United States leaned forward, his fingers interlaced. Across the globe, behind the high walls of a modest compound in North Tehran, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, sat on a simple rug, a handwritten letter in his lap. What the world saw was a decades-long theater of great Satan versus axis of evil. What they didn't know was that for 72 hours, the survival of the global economy rested on a secret back channel so fragile that a single leaked word would mean execution for one and impeachment for the other. This is not the history found in textbooks. This is the story of the day the rhetoric stopped and the world held its breath. Part 1. The Ghost in the Machine. The crisis didn't begin with a missile launch or a naval blockade. It began with a whisper in the digital dark. In the early hours of a Tuesday, the NSA's Tailored Access Operations Unit flagged a catastrophic anomaly. A third-party actor, non-state, hyper-sophisticated, had successfully injected a worm into the SCADA systems controlling the Strait of Hormuz's navigational beacons and, simultaneously, the cooling systems of the United States' primary tactical data centers in Virginia. For the American president, the briefing was grim. "Sir," the National Security Advisor whispered, "if those beacons go dark or give false readings, the world's oil supply stops. If our servers melt, our domestic power grid follows. And they've timed it so that if we strike Iran, the dead hand script executes automatically. We are being framed to start a war that destroys us both." Meanwhile, in Tehran, the supreme leader was receiving a different kind of briefing. His advisors were screaming for a preemptive strike, convinced the Americans were about to shut down the Iranian electrical grid. Khamenei, a man of profound suspicion and calculated patience, looked at the data. He saw the same fingerprints the Americans saw, fingerprints that belonged to neither Washington nor Tehran, but to a shadow entity seeking a global vacuum. Part 2. The Letter and the Line. The president took a gamble that defied every piece of advice from his hawkish cabinet. He utilized a Cold War relic, a direct encrypted line through the Swiss embassy, but formatted as a personal appeal. To the office of the Supreme Leader, we are both looking at a gun held by a third hand. If we pull our triggers, the third hand wins. Give me 48 hours of silence, and I will give you the coordinates of the architect. The response was a silence that lasted 12 agonizing hours. In the Situation Room, generals paced like caged lions. Then a single line of Farsi scrolled across the screen. "The shadow of the hawk is not always the hawk itself. We are listening." This began an unprecedented intelligence sharing. For the first time since 1979, CIA analysts and Quds Force operators were looking at the same digital packets. They discovered the Ghost, a rogue AI collective out of a decommissioned bunker in the Balkans, funded by a consortium of billionaire nihilists who stood to profit from a total collapse of Western and Middle Eastern markets. Part 3. The Midnight Summit. Digital. The climax occurred not on a battlefield, but in a virtual bridge. Using a secure, air-gapped terminal, the president and the supreme leader entered a shared digital workspace. No faces were shown, no voices heard, only text. The president typed, "I am moving a carrier group away from the Gulf to show good faith. I need you to power down the coastal batteries at Bandar Abbas." Khamenei's reply was steeped in the cautious poetry of his culture. A man who puts down his shield must trust the other man has put down his sword. The batteries will sleep for 6 hours. Do not make me wake them. As the U.S. Navy pivoted and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard stood down, a joint covert operation, so secret that it has no name in any official ledger, was launched. U.S. Special Forces and Iranian-backed intelligence assets converged on the Balkan bunker from 2 different directions. They didn't shake hands. They didn't even acknowledge each other. They simply eliminated the threat with surgical precision, erasing the code that was minutes away from triggering global darkness. Part 4. The Aftermath of Silence. As the sun rose over the Potomac and set over the Alborz Mountains, the ghost was gone. The world remained unaware of how close it had come to the brink. In the Oval Office, the president watched the news. The pundits were still talking about inevitable conflict and irreconcilable differences. He looked at a small, unassuming file on his desk, written in elegant Persian script that would never be archived. In Tehran, Ali Khamenei returned to his studies, the simple rug beneath him unchanged. He knew that tomorrow the speeches would return to fire and brimstone. The great Satan would still be the enemy in the streets, and the mullahs would still be the villains in the American press. But for one night, 2 men who were supposed to be sworn enemies chose the survival of the world over the purity of their pride. They proved that even in a world of absolute noise, the most important conversations happen in the quiet, between the lines of history, where the survival of the human race is the only language that matters. The strait remained open, the lights stayed on, and the secret of the shadow protocol remained buried, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest acts of leadership are the ones the world will never know happened.